G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, I'm going to show you how to replace a water pump on your classic Mini, upgrade the water pump pulley, change the fan, as well as replace the bypass hose between the head and the water pump. So let's get to it. Now, like always, first step, we're going to jack up the car and drain the coolant. Now once the car's jacked up, we're going to remove the radiator cap. Ideally you want to do this when it's cold, that way you're not going to burn yourself. Once you've done that, we're then going to either remove the bottom radiator hose or the drain plug. Make sure you grab a drain tin that's big enough to catch all the coolant that comes out. It's also advised, get yourself a large sheet or even an old towel, stick it underneath there, that way if you spill any, it's not going to go absolutely everywhere and you're going to be rolling around in coolant. Grab yourself a long screwdriver, put it down in the clamp, turn it to the left to loosen it. Once it's then loose, you then want to remove the pipe. Next step is to get yourself 2 half-inch spanners and we're going to loosen off the alternator bracket. Once the top bolts are done, we can then loosen the bottom bracket underneath. Now the next step is to remove the 4 bolts securing the radiator fan. Now here's another one of Tomo's tech tips. When you go to remove a belt, whether it be a fan belt, a timing belt, whatever it may be, grab yourself a permanent marker and do a directional arrow in the way in which the engine rotates. That way you know which way it came off, and if you have to reuse the belt, you can ensure that it's not going to stretch in the wrong direction. So now that we've removed the fan and we've marked the belt, we're just going to move the belt off to the side. We're going to grab the old pulley, give it a wiggle, that'll slide directly off there, and then we can go to start removing the water pump. Now you're probably wondering, why are we changing the pulley size on this? Now the original one is quite large, so therefore it's going to spin the water pump quite slow. The new one, for instance, we'll just throw that on the ground, the new one is significantly smaller, so it's going to spin it significantly faster, which is then going to give us better flow through the cooling system. Now because the water pump bolts to the alternator, we need to remove this bolt. So we're going to disconnect the coolant temperature sensor first, remove this bolt, and then we can go to remove the other 4 bolts for the water pump securing it to the engine block. We also need to remove the bottom radiator hose from the connection at the back of the water pump. Now we can go and remove the 4 bolts securing the water pump to the block. Now here's one I prepared earlier. This is the water pump bolts that we need to remove. There's one at the bottom here, along with one down here, one up the top, and then one in the side. Once you've removed all those bolts, you can then undo it. This one doesn't have the water outlet bypass hose, which mine does. So there is a hose clamp here and here on the head. We're just going to remove the one on the head, and then we're going to remove the water pump. Now that the water pump is loose, we're just going to break the seal between the block and the pump. We're going to let it drain a little bit before we then go and remove the bypass hose between the head and the block. Alright, so we have my little helper here, and we have the old water pump. Now, where my finger is where the original bypass hose was. So we're going to just clean it up. Hello. So we're just going to clean up the surface of the block before we then reinstall it and replace the bypass hose between the water pump and the head. Also, water pumps have a leaking point that if the seal starts to leak, it will come out of that hole. So as you can see here, where the crusty coolant is, that's where it's been leaking from the impeller. Grab yourself a razor blade and go ahead and clean up the surface on the block where the water pump's seated. So like always, we've applied the sealant to either side of the gasket and the housing of the water pump. Now it's time to reinstall it. So that's it guys, thanks heaps for watching. That's how you replace the water pump on your classic Mini, along with upgrade the water pump pulley and replace a radiator fan. Don't forget to make sure that you check it for leaks, and if you have a heater, switch it on, make sure the heater gets hot and the coolant system is bled correctly. If there's any leaks, make sure you rectify them before you go for a drive. Good work, mister. Once again guys, stay COVID safe, and we'll see you next time on an episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups, all things DIY and mechanical.